Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate your time for the introduction, and for everyone, thank you for joining today. If you had a chance to be on last week's webinar, we had a blast talking about the 7 elements of telling your story so you can leverage the utilization of story to advance your fundraising efforts for your nonprofit. And today is sort of a part 2, but it's a heavy part 2. And so there's a lot of details that we're going to be going into regarding the StoryBrand marketing checklist. But I want to open it up with the overwhelming question: is your current marketing plan making you money or draining your resources? So think about it. You think about what you do on a day-to-day basis, marketing for your nonprofit. Is it advancing your cause from a funding standpoint, or is it a drain? Most organizations that we deal with, and I would say upwards of 80%, 90% we deal with, they would say it's a drain. And so we're going to talk about this, the 5 tools that you need to ensure that this is not the case for you. And I want to have one little bit of housekeeping here. If you see something that says sales, or if it's more businessy, don't worry about that at all. Insert funding, insert donation. The marketing for nonprofits and marketing for for-profit organizations have a lot of similarities. There's some obvious differences, but the same rules apply for what we're talking about today regarding your marketing plan. So we want to know if these things are working or not working, right? If you're a nonprofit that is spending money on ads, which is perfectly appropriate, it's very much a great strategy to acquire new donors. Is it working? Are you getting new customers, donors on a consistent basis? Is that working for you? Is your website converting, let's just say, prospective donors into active funders for your organization? Are leads coming in, and are they learning about your organization and deciding to give to your organization just based off of interacting with your website? And then finally, are your emails raising more money for your organization? Think about that. If you're answering no to any of these 3 or all of these 3, I totally get it. I totally understand. But the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. And we're going to talk about the plan that you need to have in place to ensure that all of this is working. And that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about the Marketing Made Simple checklist. These are tools that you need. And I want you to write this phrase down: to really advance the speed of relationship. Because I know I'm talking to a lot of nonprofit leaders. I know that you care about people. I know that. But understanding that with digital marketing, we're really trying to enhance the speed of relationship with people that we've never met before. So speed of relationship, that please write that phrase down and underline it, because that is what this checklist is all about. How do I attract more people to my cause? How do I get them to my website? How do I convert them into donors for my cause? What do I need to tell them? What do they need to know in order for the speed of relationship to take place? We're trying to establish relationship quickly online. So let's talk about the checklist. The first thing that you need, the first tool in your tool belt, is a one-liner for your nonprofit. This is a simple, straightforward 1 to 2 sentence phrase that is clear, concise, and is very, very helpful in helping new people find out what you do. The perfect example of when a one-liner would be used: if somebody asks you, "What do you do?" Right? If someone says, "What do you do?" What typically happens is people go on and on and on and on and on, never really get anywhere, never really land the plane, to use that phrase, and they end up confusing people more and more. If you remember our webinar last week, it was all about confusion is the enemy of your success. We want to be clear, concise, and to the point. The next tool in our tool belt really is a wireframed website. And we're going to go over an example of what that looks like today. But it is a website that, again, passes the grunt test. We talked about the grunt test last week. Today really is more about the action items needed to really convert all of the work that we talked about last week into a true plan for your organization. So you need a wireframed website that, again, is scannable, easy to read, is very clear and compelling, and is converting leads into donors. That is the whole purpose. We are trying to advance your mission, and we need to raise a lot of money in order to do that. That's the purpose there. The next thing that you need is a lead generator. I cannot emphasize how important this is. A lead generator can take many different forms, but it has one job. The job is to acquire email addresses. You need to be getting new email addresses every single day of the week from prospective donors all of the time. Your lead generator is the way that happens. And then finally, you need to have an email nurture campaign. We're going to talk a lot about nurture campaigns today. And this is one thing, if you want to talk about increasing donor retention, your nurture campaign is the path forward to do exactly that. And then the last thing, it's called a sales campaign. Let's just call it a development campaign because this is a nonprofit audience. This is how we get down on a knee and say, hey, let's get married. Let's raise some money for this organization. Give today. And there's a very specific way that we recommend that nonprofits go through this sales campaign, donor campaign, and do so very, very quickly. Remember, all of these tools have a job of creating new relationships, and we're trying to accelerate the timeline. So this is all for people that have never heard of you before. Somebody asks you, what do you do? Somebody goes to your website and they're like, what does this organization do? You have to be extremely clear in how you answer that. Your website needs to tell prospective donors the information that they need to justify giving to your organization. A lead generator is for those donors, those potential donors that have said, you know what, I like this organization, but I'm not quite ready to start giving. I want to learn more information. This is how you get their email address so you can then nurture those relationships and then call those relationships to ask action. You can have them give now. So these are the 5 tools that you need. Take a screenshot, write it down, whatever you need to do. We're going to go more in depth here. These are the 5 tools that we're going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and dive straight into a one-liner. A one-liner is based on the principles of storytelling. We talked about this a little bit last week. This is the best storytellers in the world are in Hollywood. They're also in San Francisco. So they're in Los Angeles and San Francisco pretty much when it comes to venture capital firms and screenwriters, authors, folks of that nature. And a one-liner can really be broken into 3 different parts. The first part is the problem. If you remember from last week, we talked about brand script session. During the brand script session, we talked about how important it is that you talk about the problem that is most relevant to your funders. Okay, we are talking about raising more money today. There are lots of ways that we can talk about one-liners. We are talking about how we can help you raise more money. We have to talk about the problem that is most relevant, that works the most effectively and efficiently for your organization, and that resonates with your ideal donors. The next thing that we're talking about is product or solution. If I was talking to an e-commerce company, we'd be talking about products, but we're talking about nonprofit solutions. So we start with the problem so that people can anchor you in their mind. Oh, this person cares about this problem. We're trying to assign value to how other people view you. And then the next thing that you do is you talk about the solution. Now they are assigning their understanding of you with, oh, this person takes care of insert problem and solution. And then finally, the last section of the one-liner is the result. So it starts with a phrase about the problem, a phrase about the solution that leads to an end result. Because people do not have time. They don't have time in their day to go try and figure out who you are, what you do, and how you make the world a better place. You need to tell them what problem you solve, right? What is the problem that you solve? And what is the end result that you're creating by solving that problem? I cannot emphasize how important it is that every single person alive has a one-liner, but absolutely for nonprofits, what is the one-liner for your organization? What is the overarching problem that you exist to solve? What is the solution that you are providing to solve that problem? And what is the end result? Problem, solution, result. Please write those things down. It'll take a second to give you time to write that down. Problem, solution, result. Let's dive into a quick example. I think most people have interacted with a general contractor of some sort. You've dealt with building, you've had different problems, or maybe you've wanted to remodel your home. Maybe you want to remodel an apartment or a condo, whatever it may be. So we're going to use an example that most people can relate to, is working with a contracting company. So let's think about the problem that they have here. And I want you to notice how conversational this language is. right? And this is, you might be thinking, oh, one-liner, it looks really long. It is long. It's 1 to 2 sentences. Use as many words as you can. Keep it concise, though. We want to aim for being concise. So let's think about the problem statement here. Most people get stressed out when they think about having to remodel their kitchen. So they never actually do it. So most people, they want to remodel their kitchen, but they get stressed out so much so that they never actually do it. It's a great problem statement. MC Contractors, the name of this company, MC Contractors takes the pain out of your remodel project so you get the dream kitchen faster without all the hassle. So MC Contractors takes the pain out of your remodel project. It's your solution. So you get the dream kitchen faster without all the hassle. That's the result. So we've got a sentence on the problem and a compound sentence. The first part is based on the solution, and the last part is based on the result. Very clear, pithy, easy to understand. 5-year-old could understand this. The simpler, the better. That's what we're going for here. And that's what you have with this one-liner example. Now, the next thing that we need is we need to have a wireframed website. Wireframed websites really are the difference in how do you ensure that your website is your #1 development officer for your nonprofit. Your website should be the rainmaker of your nonprofit because people are able to visit that website, click donate, and send you money without you having to have a conversation with them. So we need to start putting more responsibility on our website to be our #1 development officer by far and away. It needs to be your #1. So let's talk about what is necessary for a wireframe website. We talked about this last week, but I think it's worth restating. It must pass the grunt test. Website visitors will give you 3 to 5 seconds before they decide to click on something or leave. I can't tell you how important this is. So the grunt test is, what do you do? How do I get it? How does it make my life better? So please write this down. The grunt test is, what do you do? How do I get it? How does it make my life better? We have to be able to answer those 3 things in order for our website to be a very effective development officer for our organization. The other thing that it needs, and you would not believe how often I see this, is that there are not clear calls to action on the website. You must have extremely explicitly clear calls to action like donate today, give today, bring hope today, some kind of clear call to action on your website to ensure that your website's working well for you. Next thing is that it needs to be scannable. People do not read websites word for word like they read a book. They scan it and they're looking for information that how are you going to make my life better? Or how are you making the world better? Something that I want to be aligned with and give money to. So again, it's got to pass the grunt test, has to have clear calls to action, needs to be scannable, and then also it needs to have headers. One thing that headers do is they break up text, and they also help things be more scannable at the same time, but then it encourages me to continue reading. So grunt test, calls to action, scannable with headers. Think about like back in the good old days when we used to hold newspapers, right? Think about how bold these headers were. Websites need to have headers. Please remember that and utilize it. Here's an example of what this could look like. And this is just a sample company. It's called Circuit e-bikes. So first thing you notice, everyone always starts reading in the top left. Now, unless we were, I grew up reading in Hebrew or Arabic or some other Semitic language, we would start on the top right, but we don't. We're starting in the top left. So already I know, what do you like? Who are you? What do you do? Right? Circuit e-bikes. Okay, that's who you are. How do I get it is answered. Excuse me. How do I get it is answered. Find a dealer. It's actually answered twice here. And then how does it make my life better? Be the leader of the pack. Get on a revolutionary new bike. Save the environment, save money, save time. Because this is also scannable, I can read this in 3 to 5 seconds, and I'm going to be encouraged to either click on something or keep scrolling down the website. So this is a good example of very clean, clear, super concise, right? Be the leader of the pack, 6 to 7 words. Get on a revolutionary new bike. Again, 6 to 7 words right there. Very clean and clear, very on the nose. Nonprofits would do very, very well to emulate this kind of pithy, concise language for their organization. Really, really important. Next thing that we're talking about is a lead generator, right? Lead generators are what bring the entire funnel together, because a lead generator is what allows you to acquire an email address for people that aren't quite ready to make a buying commitment. So they're not quite ready, but you give them the opportunity to give you an email address. And I want you to think about this. Most people view the cost of their email to be somewhere between $5 and $20. So they feel like they've given you money in some way. Even if it's like, oh yeah, get 10% off our next order. A lot of e-commerce companies do that. 10% off your next order, you give your email address for that because you feel like you're getting value from it. But nonprofits would do very, very well to give so much value in the form of a lead generating PDF, of a video series, or something of that matter, impact report, something like that, that is going to say, yeah, I will give you $5 worth my email in exchange for this kind of value. So lead generators definitely need to lead with value, and they need to be very interesting at the same time. So give it an interesting title, provide content that offers value, qualify your audience. I don't think this is necessarily as important for nonprofits, but here's what I will say. We always recommend nonprofits create what we call an ideal donor profile. You want to be attracting more of your ideal donors to give to your organization. And your lead generator is a very helpful tool in ensuring that you're going to attract more of your ideal donors. And you might be thinking, hey man, I'll take money from anybody. I get it, been in your shoes. I completely understand that. But just please remember that it is so much more efficient and effective to attract an ideal donor and do that again and again and again. And then obviously the ultimate goal of a lead generator is to get an email address so that you can continue what we'll go into the next section of nurturing that relationship. So think of an interesting title. Think about content that would provide your ideal donors value, qualify the audience, and be sure that you're getting email addresses. So we want to dive deep into that, be thinking about what's most effective for getting new email addresses for your organization so that you can nurture those relationships and raise money in the future. So here's a lead generator that our company uses. It's called a nonprofit fundraising quiz. And we're going to talk about this again at the end. But this is the lead generator that we use to add value to nonprofit leaders on helping them assessing how they can advance their fundraising strategy using StoryBrand and other great resources just like that. So we use a quiz. I love quizzes. I personally love to learn, but I love doing quizzes. And it's a clean and clear start your fundraising quiz. But this is an example of what a lead generator could be for your organization. So now let's dive into your nurture campaign. The nurture campaign is tremendously important. I know I said this earlier, but we have to talk about the importance of attracting new leads and then nurturing those leads until they are ready to make a funding decision, until they are ready to donate to your organization. So we want to nurture that relationship as much as we can. The other thing we want to do is we want to nurture our existing donors too. We need to do both, right? That's why marketing is so hard. It takes so much energy and effort. It's a lot of work to nurture relationships, especially online. It's very, very a lot of challenge, a lot of nuance. It's very challenging to do that. So a nurture campaign needs to do a couple of things. If you were on last week's webinar, you remember how important it is to be the guide. You want to be the guide of the story, not the hero, right? You're not Luke Skywalker, you're Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your donors view themselves as Luke Skywalker. You probably view yourself as Luke Skywalker, but they need to view you as Obi-Wan. They need to view you, let's just keep going with Star Wars, as Yoda. They need to view you as Haymitch from the Hunger Games, right? You're not the main character. You're not Katniss. You're not Harry Potter. You're Dumbledore. You cannot compete with people over being the hero. You will always lose that battle because people are intrinsically, they are so emphatic on believing that they are the hero of their own story. Be sure that you are positioned as the guide. I cannot emphasize how important it is to be the guide. That is the step forward. Your nonprofit has been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and you're helping other heroes win the day. So important that we position it that way. Next thing is you have to repeat the problem that you solve again and again and again. No one should be confused ever on what problem your organization solves. Everyone should know who you are, what you stand for, and how you're making the world a better place. It has to be so easy to understand, and you would not believe how common it is for nonprofits of all sizes to continuously confuse their donors, confuse their employees, confuse everyone because they're not clear on the problem that they solve. And the other thing a nurture campaign does is it reminds people that you exist, right? That's one thing that's really important to remember, is that the nurture campaign really is the opportunity to email someone once a week, more often, less often. We recommend at least once a week, to say, hey, we're here. This is what we're all about. This is what we stand for. Give today, right? We have to give people the opportunity to be reminded of who we are, because people are inundated with marketing messages all of the time. Hundreds of emails, thousands of TikToks, Instagrams, Twitters, whatever. They're constantly inundated. But the more clear you are, the higher the likelihood that you will succeed. And the other thing is you always need to be leading with value. Always lead with value. I love using the example. If anyone has ever read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he has a newsletter, right? And I love telling people that that is a newsletter that I am never going to unsubscribe from, because he is so emphatic about delivering value with every single newsletter. I'm never going to unsubscribe. I love what the guy has to say. I think he's fantastic. He has wonderful quotes from other people, very practical, very helpful. There's certain nonprofits that I will never unsubscribe from because I believe in the work that they're doing. You want to be that nonprofit. Be the nonprofit that provides so much value, people will never unsubscribe. Be the nonprofit that is always leading as the guide, that people will never unsubscribe. That is the secret to building a massive donor database and raising a ton of money, is being a clear, great communicator that is always offering value and positioning their donors as the heroes of the story. If you remember last week, there are two different ways that we can pitch nonprofit StoryBrand scripts. We can lead with the hero as the people that you serve or the cause that you serve, and the donor can be the call to action of donate today, or you can lead with your donor's the hero of the story. They both work. You have to do both. At the end of the day, nonprofits have to do both. And so if you remember back to last week, we can talk about brand scripts. Please ask questions during our Q&A so we can go through that. But just remember how important it is to position your brand as the guide, repeat the problem that you solve, reminding everyone that you exist, and always offer value. You've got to do all of it, and you have to do it all really well. Now, the next thing is a sales campaign. So sales campaigns can take on multiple forms, but you have to have one. That's what I want to really emphasize. All of these things can have a little bit of nuance, but you have to ensure that you're doing all 5 steps of this checklist, because if you're not, there's a massive gap in your marketing plan, and we've got to make sure your marketing plan is going to work for you. Now, the sales campaign, again, it's a development campaign, a fundraising campaign. You have to have a game plan for how you're going to directly raise money. Where a nurture campaign is more focused on adding value, a sales campaign is more focused on raising money. And so there are a couple of things that you want to be sure that you're doing well. One, you're reminding the donor of what problem that you solve, both for them and for the people that you serve. You've got to be doing that. Got to be super clear on that front. You have to be prepared to overcome objections, right? There are objections that people will come back to you 100 times over. But what you probably may not have done, when you make a list of the objections that people actually have, there's probably only about 2 or 3 of them that are most consistent. So we have to be prepared to overcome those objections to do that. And the other thing is you want to introduce paradigm shifts. You previously thought that this was the issue, but our nonprofit has determined that this is actually the issue. An example of that is some nonprofits are completely focused on drilling wells. Other nonprofits are focused on maintaining water wells. And so it really is a matter of, you might think there needs, and I'm just making this up, please don't run with this as fact. You might think that we need to drill 500,000 more wells in Sierra Leone, but the reality is we just need to purify 5,000 of them. We should continually maintain and keep up the 5,000 wells. So it's just introducing paradigm shifts is a really effective way to do that. to sort of continue to add that value. And the last thing is you need to ask for the donation, right? You need to actually say, give today. We need to be punchy. We need to be respectful, but we need to be confident in the services that we provide. So we can say, give now, your donations are making a difference. And so a sales campaign can be an email campaign. You can do this via email. You can do this via phone call, Zoom call. You can do this via mail, like actual, snail mail. But at the end of the day, you have to have a sales campaign in place that is working in tandem with your nurture sequence, with your nurture campaign. Your nurture campaign should probably be, you should definitely have email dialed in, but you can bolt on, social media. You can bolt on, like I said, snail mail as well for that. But just remember that you have to sit back and ask yourself, am I doing these things? If I'm following all 5 steps of this checklist? And so this is an example. This is a company website. We talked about it last week, of a very ineffective website. So let's say I searched for something or maybe I heard about a nonprofit and I wound up on your website, and this is what I'm looking at. No value, does not pass the grunt test. Your journey starts here. These words don't mean anything. It's not helpful. The call to action, get started. Up here it says, why start? Your journey starts here. Artisan, innovative solutions. It's just not helpful. It's a highly ineffective website. And honestly, it's a aesthetically pleasing website, but it's not an effective website. Whereas a company like this passes the grunt test in 3 to 5 seconds. And I know exactly what the next step is. And so just imagine that a pop-up arrives moments later, and all of a sudden, I've got a lead generating PDF ready to be downloaded. That's what we're dealing with here. We have to turn your website into a highly effective sales funnel, donor funnel for your organization. It's so important that we do that and we do it the right way. So just remember, we've got to execute this checklist for multiple reasons, right? The most beautiful thing about a sales funnel, about donor funnel, is that it works for you while you sleep, right? People can download your PDF at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they can start receiving your emails after that. It's another thing that you get to do when you do this right is that you get to raise money without being pushy. Nobody wants to be pushy. In fact, so many people are afraid of fundraising because it's too pushy. I love to use the phrase, let's put the fun back in fundraising. You do that when you're adding value and being the guide. That's how you do it the right way. Lead with value and be the guide. The other thing is when this works well, it turns into an enormous return on investment. I mean, just truly an enormous return on investment when you do it the right way. And we've helped organizations raise tens of millions of dollars by following these steps because it just works. When you do it the right way, when you follow the steps of the process and you ensure that it's resonating with your ideal donors and with your cause, you can do magical things for a nonprofit. So I really want to emphasize that you should not spend another marketing dollar without a plan. And you need to be sure that your plan is absolutely accounting for the 5 steps of this checklist. Really, really want to emphasize that and be sure that we are aligned accordingly. So here's your call to action today. I want you to go to fundraisingquiz.org. If you haven't already taken the assessment, please take that assessment. It will take you 2 minutes, and it is going to show you in a clear report that you will receive immediately what is missing from your plan. All you're going to do is just get feedback on things that you're doing really well and feedback on things that you might need to improve. So you'll identify areas of improvement, and you'll be able to fix your marketing plan immediately. You'll be able to do that today. So please go to fundraisingquiz.org, take the 2-minute assessment. Again, it won't take you any time. Answer the questions as straightforward and honestly as you can so that you can move forward by making a better marketing plan and do that today. And the fun thing is that for Keela attendees, you get a free discovery call, a free review of your fundraising plan. And we get to talk about this over Zoom, a 30-minute session where we'll get to dive in and address these areas for improvement so that you can start raising more money and advance your cause and start doing exceptionally well. So that is everything I have for the presentation. I would love to answer any questions that you might have regarding this webinar. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. 2 weeks in a row, and you are killing it. What great presentations. And
Too
I'm
kind.
really happy to have you here and happy to dive into some questions that we've already had coming through the chat. And please, everyone, know if you have any more questions that come, you can keep them going on through the chat and we'll be cycling through them as we go. First question was from Jan. For sponsorship / corporate partnership opportunities, do you recommend including all of that info you mentioned on the website? Or is it better to have corporations reach out if they're interested in getting more information?
Oh, great question. Good question, Jen. So a couple things to consider is that you probably have different types of donors, right? And you just alluded to the fact that you've got corporate sponsorships, different kinds of funders. And this is where we spend a lot of time talking about ideal donor profiles. You want to have different profiles for your ideal donors. Some organizations make 80% of their money from government funding. That's awesome. Who's their ideal donor? Government. That's where the money comes from. Some have millennial Gen Z donors, some have high net worth donors, some have corporate partners. And so we want to be sure that we have everything arranged for these different donor types accordingly on your website. And so different ways to do that. One, maybe you just have a corporate partner page on your website where people can scroll through and digest all of that information accordingly. Or maybe you have a cold outreach process to where you're reaching out to these corporations, you're actively engaging. And one thing I will say, this is probably the number one mistake that I see nonprofits make, is that they are not on the offensive to acquire new donors. So what is your plan to go get more corporate partners rather than wondering when they're going to come to you? And so I love that people are coming to you. I think that's fabulous. It's the best problem in the world to have. It's not a problem. It's a wonderful thing. But have a plan in place on how you're going to go get more of them so that you can raise more money and advance your cause to do a lot more good and do wonderful things on top of it. I hope that answers your question. If it does not, please put a follow-up in the chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Next question is from Trisha. Would you not have a CTA for donation in the nurture as well as providing a value?
Excellent question. Yes, I would. I absolutely would put the CTA. It's just with the sales campaign, it's a little bit different because it is, hey, we're doing this, y'all. Like we're getting down on a knee and we're saying we're getting married. I would definitely put the CTA in different ways into a nurture sequence. There's different ways to skin it. Just want to approach that. Just say that very candidly. But imagine if this is a new donor versus someone that's given to you in the past, it's a different conversation. It's a different relationship, right? And we're trying to increase the speed of that relationship. So John Mark Vanderpool has never given to your organization before. If I download your PDF and you were just beating me over the head with give today, give today, give today, without giving me any value, I'm like, listen, we don't know each other. So I need to increase the speed of relationship. I need to start trusting you more. I need to know that you're a good guide, that you can lead me down this path well before I'm like, I'm going to give you 50 grand. Like, it's just the conversation really needs to be around new donors or potential donors versus existing donors, because an existing donor, hey, they know that what you're all about and they know that giving to you is a good thing. And they'll be it's just a different relationship. So just respect the differences there is all I'm saying.
Absolutely. It's important to make that connection and provide that value on top of it, for sure. A question from Norman. Is there a different strategy you need to implement it if your main need is recruiting volunteers rather than only getting donations?
I love this question. I'm so glad you asked this question. If you want to know what the kinds of things that our company obsesses about, it's how we get these funnels working for you accordingly. So that is a volunteer funnel, right? So just pull that out of your brain for a second. This is a volunteer funnel that you're talking about now. It's a different hero, right? It's not a donor funnel. It is a volunteer funnel. I love volunteers. I love them so much. They reduce cost of providing services for nonprofits so much. It's delightful. Volunteers are wonderful, wonderful things. But that's a different funnel. You're not trying to raise money from them. You're trying to raise time from them. Like that's what you're doing. That's a huge, huge thing. And so it's a different concept. It's a different call to action. It's still a funnel though. And so these same steps apply to this funnel. Instead of give today, it's register, volunteer, whatever your call to action would be. And then you get them in that volunteer sequence. We did a wonderful report for one of our clients in Los Angeles, and we were emphasizing how important it is to really get this volunteer funnel rolling, because they have a drop off. They have a lot of first timers, and they have a lot of people that have been around for over 5 years, but there's a huge gap in 1 year to 5 years. Like they just completely fall off. So you've got the diehards that stick around, and you've got a lot of new people, but you miss the in between. The opportunities for your nonprofit with those people that are in that in between, it's limitless. So a volunteer funnel is so important. That's not the topic for today, but you absolutely can apply these same principles to volunteer funnels. So thank you for asking that. Love that question.
Yes, thanks, Norman. Those are great questions. A question from Chris. Are you able to suggest some effective lead generators for nonprofits?
Great question. Love it. So lots of nuance. I want to be clear. Lead generators, think of it as, it could be as diverse as the music that you listen to, diverse as in the food you like to prepare. Lead generators can take on so many different forms. And so it can be, impact reports is a great lead generator. It can be video series. They're great lead generators for nonprofits, especially showing contrast, like what the world looked like before our nonprofit intervened with this cause versus what does it look like now. What you want to avoid are the really boring, generic things that everybody does. Join our newsletter to get updates from our nonprofit. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares about generic stuff like that. And that isn't because you don't matter. It's because people are busy and they don't need another newsletter update unless there's a ton of value associated with that. So think about things like, what is the extreme value that your organization provides people that would excite your donors to new donors, lead donors, these are people that do not give to you, to give you the email address. We spend a lot of time working with organizations on what would the most ideal just lead generator be in what form, right? And it can be an SMS thing. So this could be everything via your phone. It doesn't just have to be email. It's just really contact information. Ideally, you want email because it has the highest open rate and it's the most effective for fundraising. But just how can you get that first hook in so you can keep the relationship going? Again, speed of relationship. We're trying to condense the time to speed of relationship here.
Amazing. We had a question from Rochelle. She was wondering if she could give a quick recap again on what the grunt test was.
Oh, good question. Thank you, Rochelle. I'm glad you asked that. This is so important. It's really, really important. If you get this right, you will see a difference. I'm just going to let you know, I can promise you that, and we're not allowed to promise things in marketing, but I can promise you that you will see an improvement with your marketing efforts when you pass the grunt test. Step one, what do you do? I go to your website. So imagine someone has never seen your website before. I'm now there. I need to know, what do you do? How do I get it? Or what do you want me to do? Or one of those answers. And then how is it making my life better? So think about that. For nonprofit context, I at least need to know the name of your organization, right? At least give me that. Please have a logo that has your name on it, something. Very straightforward there. But I need to know what you do. What is the mission of the organization? I'm not asking for a mission statement. What do you do? What is the transformation that your organization strives to create? So many nonprofits, and great ones, so many of them, don't answer that question. What change do you seek to create? What change are you creating? Give it to me in an easy to understand statement. Make it clear, make it easy to understand. And then finally, like, how do I get it? And like, how does it make the world better? How does it make my life better? I need to have a call to action. Give today, donate now, bring hope today, whatever your CTA is, sponsor a child, some kind of call. I said CTA, call to action. That's what I'm referring to. And then also, how does it make my life better too? So I'm a donor. I'm not the end user. This is why nonprofit marketing is more complicated, because I'm not paying you for a service that serves me directly. I'm giving you money to serve someone else. But, huge but here, I receive benefit, societal benefit of some kind, for giving you money to serve something else, cause or individual. So who do I become by giving you money? We're getting into the psychology of marketing here, but I become a philanthropist. I become a change maker. I become an agent of change or agent of impact. I become something, hopefully very positive, by giving to your organization. So the grunt test, it's really 3 questions. What do you do? How do I get it? How does it make my life better? So what's the mission of your organization? How do I give to it? And how does it make the world better and me better? Got that, Rochelle? Please have a follow-up question if that's not clear enough.
And I think, John, last week you mentioned that in last week's webinar as well, of making that connection with donors and having those nonprofits that you remember at the top of your head because the donor feels like they're a part of it. So if there's anyone who missed last week's webinar, you can get access to that because John mentions that connection and making the donor feel like they're benefiting from it. Great webinars.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Next question comes from Yamila. I'd like to know which platforms you would use for lead generators. Do you only use your website? And if so, how do you make people go to your website?
You're just asking great questions. This is the whole thing here. So that's awesome. So I want to make sure I answer your questions. What platforms would I recommend using? Are you saying social platforms, like things like that? Is that the question?
I would guess any platforms that would be available. She mentioned the website obviously being the primary one. Oh, yes, into the chat. So social media platforms, any platforms that you would recommend.
Perfect. Great question. So a couple things here. Again, I would do an ideal donor profile. That's where I always start. We have to know what target we are aiming for because you can attract all sorts of things to an organization, right? You can do all sorts of things. So we want to be very clear with whom we are targeting. And so I would start there and I would find out where we have the highest likelihood of getting more of them. Let's use a fishing analogy, right? If I'm going to go, I grew up in the Southeast, the United States. So if I'm going to go fishing for bass, I'm going to go use different lures and go fishing in different lakes. But if I'm going to go down to the Gulf or go to California, go to Hawaii, do some deep sea fishing, it's different, right? I'm going to go for, mahi-mahi or something else, and I'm going to fish very differently. So we need to find out who's the ideal donor, where do they congregate, and then what do we need to do to go really create that relationship, right? How are we leading with curiosity, enlightenment, intrigue, all the things that we talk about in marketing? How do we go get more of them? So I can't say, oh, you should go for Facebook. It's 100% Facebook. It might be for you. It might not be for you. I can't tell you that. Some people do very well with search engine optimization. They get found very easily. Think about UNICEF, enormous organization, right? It's the United Nations, unlimited funding. They spend a lot of money on Google ads and Facebook ads. They're able to do that because they have the budget for it. That doesn't mean that you couldn't win with Google and Facebook. It's just a matter of they're going for anybody with a pulse and a credit card because they're government funded and they have the capacity. They're just trying to build their donor base as much as they possibly can. So you want to be very specific, very targeted with whom you're trying to attract, and then find out where they congregate. If you're 100% referral based, that's perfectly fine. You just need to find ways to get more referrals up into a certain point. Usually when you're doing, $3 to $5 million a year, you need to start thinking about other channels, like other social media platforms to start checking. You're probably mostly referral based because most organizations are. That's just a fact. It's just a fact. Most organizations are referral based. And so I would want to know, how can I triple referrals in 2023? How could I 3x? Like, what would I have to do to triple the amount of referrals I'm getting over the next 10 months? And so think about it that way, because people sort of have this idea of, close their eyes and, spray and pray kind of a thing when it comes to marketing. And that's not the purpose of today's conversation. The purpose of today's conversation is you need a plan and you need to follow these 5 steps. But to answer your follow-up question is, how do you go get more of them? You're very clear on who you're targeting and you're very clear on where they come from. And then you only focus on that. You only focus on that. You don't focus on TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, SEO, all of these things at the same time, unless you have an enormous budget. If you have an enormous budget, go for it. But you still, even people that do, they have target donor profiles on each one of those platforms. And then they have target, watering holes that they go after on each one of those platforms. It's never spray and pray. It is always extremely clear and concise. Great question.
Building off of that question, I guess once you have those segmented targets, do you recommend a certain number of welcome emails that one should have in a nurture campaign? This is a question from Trisha.
Trisha, excellent question. Minimum of 5 in the first nurture campaign. So you want to have that welcome email. So let's assume they've downloaded your PDF. So that first email is the thank you for downloading, kind of email. And then you have at least 5 emails that come over the next 3 weeks. I'll give you a 3-week time. So you've got 4 emails over 3 weeks, 4 additional over 3 weeks. But then you want to at least have a 52-week nurture campaign. I know that sounds like a lot of work. So I'm sorry, it is a lot of work. But you have to nurture these relationships consistently. So people need to be updated on you. Why? They need to remember that you exist. That's just how it is. People are busy, right? And you're asking people to part with money for a service that does not directly provide value to them. And so nonprofits need to be even better marketers than business owners, because business owners are like, hey, I'm going to provide you this service. I'm going to make your life better. You're saying, hey, there's this huge problem out there. We need to raise money to make this problem go away, or at least make it better. That's hard, right? Like, it's a really hard job. And so just understand, running a nonprofit is extraordinarily challenging. Marketing for a nonprofit is extremely hard. So that's why we're so keen on giving you the kinds of steps, giving you the clarity that you need to go win, because it's harder. I just want you to know it's harder. I've run nonprofits, I've run businesses. It's harder. And so I want to be clear on that.
Thanks, John. Next question comes from Emily. In the sales campaign, she didn't totally follow the introduction of a paradigm shift, and was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, this is fun. This is what's really interesting. And remember, a sales campaign can take on multiple forms, but let's just talk about it in the context of email. So let's think about, here's a tough one. Here's a really, really hard one. Nonprofits that are in the advocacy policy realm, it's even more nebulous and challenging, right? Again, it's nonprofit marketing is already hard, but really being in the policy space, not even policy, but advocacy space, is even harder, because you're trying to change mindsets. You're trying to change beliefs that lead to the change of policy. So already you're like trying to convince people that what they know is wrong and they need to believe something else. That's probably the hardest thing ever, right? I mean, think about, working with children. Hey, stop doing that. And they're like, no, I want to keep doing it. You're trying to do that in mass with people that you might not ever communicate with, not ever have a relationship with. So when it comes to policy, this is sort of the purpose of documentaries, of a lot of documentaries that are more like shock and awe kind of a thing. But what was the documentary that came out a couple of years ago? It was a vegan, like a pro-vegan documentary. And it was talking about how, all this meat consumption is really bad, but it was obvious that they were targeting male athletes. So they were targeting guys. This was on Netflix during COVID. I can't remember the name of it to save my life. I apologize. And the whole thing was, hey, you can actually, live on a plant-based protein diet and still play in the NFL, or still be in mixed martial arts, or still be a professional, like an Olympian. And so they were just showing this paradigm shift of most athletes believe that they need to get all of this protein from animal protein. But what new research is showing is that you can get it from plants as well. I'm so sorry, I can't remember the name of that to save my life. But that's a massive paradigm shift. So think about a paradigm shift that you could introduce for an organization. There's lots of confusion regarding individuals that experience homelessness, right? A lot of people have negative attitudes towards the homeless community because they don't understand it. So you could introduce paradigm shifting thinking, paradigm shifts to change their thinking on what the realities of life look like. Let's say you're a disaster relief organization. I've worked with a lot of disaster relief organizations. And it's like, why would I give money to a disaster relief organization when you're only going to be on the ground for a month? And so like, well, that's actually a really great question. What our organization does is we provide that critical care really quickly to give the United Nations of the world and the Doctors Without Borders of the world enough time to get their resources together, because they're so big. It takes them longer to get there. We're so small, we're able to respond faster. So that's a paradigm shift. It's like, oh, I didn't know that 90% of the deaths occurred in the first 3 days, and that if you respond quickly, you can save 75%. You know what I mean? It's just like that kind of thinking that says, oh, okay, that's a paradigm shift. I didn't know that. Now I like you and trust you more. It's really trust. Like, now I trust you quicker. Speed of relationship. Like, that's what we just did. We just accelerated the speed of relationship by providing a paradigm shift.
And I think our brains can understand things more just a shift of our knowledge and a shift of our perspective, as opposed to a complete new idea or anything that's being introduced. So that was a great explanation, John. Thank you. Next question comes from Brienne. She's curious how you would approach a nurture campaign strategy for a land trust. We don't have typical programs running on a weekly basis. Land acquisition and stewardship comes up occasionally or sporadically. How to keep people's interest and engagement when the need/urgency is more sporadic?
Great question. Oh, love this. This is why we love this whole world of problem solving, because that's a unique problem, right? It's like, how do I do this, right? How do I go about it in this way? I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, so I'm going to go ahead and say that, but that's the beauty of marketing. Marketing is a practice of memorization. Please write that down. Marketing is a practice of memorization. Memorize this stuff. One-liners, you got to memorize it. You're going to be saying the same thing over and over again. So that's why I'm okay with being a broken record. Ideal donor profile. Who cares about your problem? You know what I mean? Like, who is it that genuinely cares about this problem? Who wins by you going out and doing this wonderful work with the land trust? Start there. And then we can really talk about, great, now how do we reverse engineer that ideal donor into our nurture campaign? I'm going to put that a little bit differently. So I'm going to imagine that you have 100 ideal donors, or 100 of one profile. You've got 100 donors in your database. Of course, use Keela because it's a fantastic platform and you should be using Keela. You've got to do that. But you notice that 80% of them gave to your organization at a certain point in that relationship, right? Maybe they had 3 calls with your founder. Maybe they went out and they experienced the good of your organization in some way, shape, or form. And then you ask yourself the question, how do I reverse engineer that and automate it so that I can attract more ideal donors, put them through the same process, and raise more money? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to reverse engineer success. So you get to look back in time and be like, what has been so effective? What's worked for us in the past? And then how do we reverse engineer the process so that we can move forward and raise more money from more of the people that care about this issue? Then I would build a nurture campaign around that. That's the path that I would go. So I know we're sort of pulling under the hood of what the process looks like when you work with social impact solutions, but I want you to know this stuff anyway. I want you to be like, oh, okay, that's how this works. It shouldn't be complicated. I mean, it really, Brian, when I want you thinking about this, it's like, how do we make this work as effectively and efficiently as possible? Imagine you have 1 month and you get 10 new leads. I'd love for it to be a lot more than that, but 10 new leads. 5 of them fit your ideal donor profile. 5 didn't, that's okay, but you got 5 new ones. I want them to go through a very, very similar, if not identical process that your existing rock star donors, your heroes, have gone through and gave. I want them to feel the value of the organization quickly so that they give more quickly. I want you to think about that. I don't want to go into the math of how exciting this gets when you get people giving faster, but it really unlocks new opportunities when you, again, accelerate that speed of relationship, and then you start accelerating your acquisition of new donors that fit that profile on top of that. We can go. Please go through, take the quiz, schedule a complimentary call so that we can talk about that, because it's so much fun. It's so great when you think about the kind of good that you can create for your organization.
I think this last question summarizes what you've been going over from Mahmood. He's learned that donors, funders, clients, volunteers, all of these funnels are very different. So he wants to make sure he's understanding correctly that his website homepage maybe cannot satisfy all of these different types of funnels, and there may be other techniques that are needed to implement it. Can you expand on that a little bit, or what kind of techniques would be needed if you have all of these different types of funnels that you're trying to address, or maybe more than one funnel you're trying to address?
Yes. So again, this is why nonprofit marketing is so much harder, right? Imagine MC Contractors, the one-liner example that we use. It's a made-up company. What do? They remodel kitchens, right? That's what they do. So what do? They spend all of their time to acquire leads of people who want to remodel their kitchen. They don't need volunteers for that, right? They don't have board members that they have to talk to every quarter or every month to tell them about the progress that they're making, unless other circumstances allow. Nonprofit marketing is harder because you have more people that you're trying to serve, because you have employees, you have volunteers, you have beneficiaries, the people that you serve, you have board members. You already have so many things, so many plates spinning, more plates spinning. A nonprofit is more akin to a publicly traded company than it is a business. And so that's why this is so hard, because you have more stakeholders. So an example I love to use for this is you think about what you call a platform company, like Silicon Valley, like Airbnb or Uber. Everyone's heard of Uber. So think about Uber. Who do they need more of? Riders or drivers? The answer is that they need more riders. They need drivers. Trust me, they absolutely need drivers. But they need a lot more riders than they need drivers. So 80% of their marketing is focused on getting more riders. 20% of their marketing is focused on getting more drivers. So think about that. When we evaluate nonprofits, it's like, okay, yes, you need volunteers, but you don't need to spend 80% of your effort acquiring volunteers. You need more funders than you do volunteers. And this is different for different kinds of organizations. So again, there's a lot of nuance here, because some organizations get all of their money funded by government entities. So they do need, they don't need to raise as much money from donors. They have funders paying for everything, but they need to spend more time acquiring new volunteers, or they need to spend more time acquiring new employees. They need to go recruit. And so it really is a matter of, it's sort of Pareto principle, 80-20, what's the right 80-20 mix for your organization? And then there's different ways to organize that on your website in general, but also for your homepage. If you go to Uber's homepage right now, 80% of it is focused on riders. Like, they need more riders. That's just what they need. They need 20% of drivers to drive everyone around. But if they only, say they had more drivers than riders, people are leaving Uber. They don't want to drive for Uber. There's no one to drive around, right? It's like, I can't make any money as a driver. But people need to get from point A to point B, and they need someone to take them there. So think about it that way. Again, this is how our process works when we work with every organization. We go through and we say, we got to do ideal donor profiles. We've got to do volunteers. We've got to do everything so that your website can be your number one funnel for everything and work exceptionally well.
Thank you so much, John. Those are all of our questions for today.
Okay.
So that concludes our session. Thank you so much again for this fantastic template and checklist and getting everyone set up with such actionable points to set up their marketing plan in 2023. We also had to thank you for the fishing references. We just noticed I have a fish in my background and a boat in yours. So we're just a big fishing gang here, apparently. That is it for me. Thanks everyone for joining today. John, I'm going to pass it to you if you would like to say a final goodbye.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. Love getting to work with Keela. Love that you're using Keela. If you're not, please start using Keela. It's a great platform. Super. It's just so important to have a database for where these people live, right? We don't have sales funnels without a database, right? So just imagine you can have all the emails in the world going up, but they need to be going somewhere. You need to be able to raise the money, and it needs to update their profiles, et cetera, et cetera. It's how you build momentum in the nonprofit space. So please, if you're not using Keela, use it. It's a great platform to definitely leverage. And I know I've said this 3 times, but I want you to get feedback on your fundraising plan. Go to fundraisingquiz.org, take the 2-minute assessment, and learn what you need to do to start making a change, because a lot of organizations are concerned about the future. We learned that last week, but at the end of the day, We have so much opportunity to advance our cause and do more good for more people. And oftentimes it's because they don't have a clear plan in place. So please take advantage of that. And thank you again for your time. And thank you for the work that you do. You don't get thanked enough. Keep it up. You're doing awesome. We're super grateful for you.
So very true. Meredith also put the link for that quiz in the chat again, and we'll
Thank
send
you.
it in the follow-up email as well. But thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.